Hi guys, my name is Aaron Palabiab. I'm a filmmaker that does a lot of moto travel content. So by now, I hope you've been able to catch my docu-vlog on our 9-day ride in the Himalayas in Ladakh, India. You can watch that up here or via the links in the description or pinned comment. But today, I want to give you some practical tips on how to prepare and share what to expect on a ride in the Himalayas. First of all, as I hope you've been able to gather from the video, riding in the Himalayas is totally worth it. Few, if any, other ride experiences match it for grand scenery and diversity of riding combined with accessible cost. Also, in case you're coming here from watching Itchy Boots' Himalayas ride on the pre-production Himalayan 452, welcome! What you'll learn in this video is entirely relevant to what she's riding, as so far, after a few episodes, I've ridden about 80% of what she's shown so far. So let's get into it. I've got a lot to share, so feel free to use the chapters to navigate and find the information you need. Before anything, let's talk about skill requirement. Of course, the first question is, are you capable of doing a ride like this? The long and short of it is, any rider with a solid amount of skills and saddle time can do this. It requires no special skill. So I'd say 90% of what we did would be easy for an experienced rider, but it would be very stressful for an inexperienced rider. In my experience, these are the skills that you'll need at the minimum in order to be able to fully enjoy a Himalayas ride instead of being stressed the whole time. Number one, all-day riding endurance, which you can get just from riding a lot. You should have experience on all-day and multi-day tours on varied terrain. This will allow you to adapt to any situation you find riding in the Himalayas. Number two, full confidence in low-speed maneuvers. A defining feature of Himalayan rides is these sharp hairpins on narrow roads with no guardrails that often have sand and dirt on them. Any mistake could cause serious injury or worse. A good rider will have zero trouble handling these at the proper slow speed, but an inexperienced rider will be prone to dropping the bike here simply out of fear. Number three, a basic idea of how to ride off-road. To be honest, the locals take the terrain sat down and slow, and the Royal Enfield Himalayan that almost everyone uses on these trips is designed to be ridden that way. But good basic standing technique and clutch control will make your experience of these sections much more fun and easier on your back, but also totally doable sat down. So it depends on your skill and comfort level. Number four, be used to handling a 190 kilo or so bike like the Royal Enfield Himalayan. As far as adventure bikes go, the Himalayan is light, but it's still no featherweight. And it can be tall for very short riders, maybe 5'5" and below. The Himalayas have many off-camber roads as well, and many sandy sections. So it's not friendly to less skilled short riders who need to put their feet down a lot. So you better not use this trip as your introduction to handling heavier, taller bikes. The altitude will also make any effort like picking up your bike exponentially harder. So if you're very short, consider asking in advance that your bike be lowered or that you get a low bike. One thing that's not required at all is being able to ride fast. The roads are too narrow and dangerous to even think of riding like a hooligan. But you can go relatively fast off-road as these sections tend to be wide and flat. For my preparation, it was mostly saddle time, particularly this 2-day, 800-kilometer ride I did on my Interceptor. You can watch that via the link above. But what really gave me confidence was my intermediate training at Motor Clyde Training Center in Batangas, where I was drilled in low-speed tight turns using a 230-kilo Harley. This helped not just my low-speed turns, but my bike control in every aspect, including off-road. In fact, I'd say it was the difference between the Himalayan ride being a challenge for me and it being an extremely enjoyable ride where I could even test my skills. So do your homework so that you can enjoy while staying totally within the limits of your skills. In the middle of the Himalayas is not the place to get crazy and risk a bad crash. The more skill you bring into this, the more you can focus on the most important thing, which is taking in all this scenery despite the challenges of altitude. Now let's talk about the big difference with Himalayan rides, the altitude. These rides in Ladakh, India are done at staggering elevations, and that's what makes these roads so special. Your base in the main city of Leh is already at 3,300 meters, almost 11,000 feet. The tallest mountain in the Philippines is Mount Apo at 2,954 meters, or less than 10,000 feet. So yes, you will feel it. So, how do you prepare for this? Surprisingly, it's not physical fitness per se. In fact, it's fit people who think they can handle it easily whom I see pushing too hard and eventually suffering from altitude sickness. If this gets to become AMS, acute mountain sickness, it could literally kill you. But if you do as you're told by your guides as you acclimatize, then you'll be fine. The tours are designed to give you a couple of days to get used to the altitude down in Leh. And your task there is to take it as easy as possible. Don't go running up a hill even if you think you can. Try to operate at about 50% or less of your physical capacity in the first few days and always stay hydrated. Altitude medicine also helps. This is acetazolamide, which it might be called Diamox. In the Philippines, it's called Cetamid. I'd bring enough for about a week, but consult your doctor first. I tried being off the pills on day 3 of our ride, thinking I'd be acclimatized already. But I struggled going up to Kaksangla Pass at 5,441 meters or 17,800 feet. What did it feel like? Well, in my case, I felt like my eyes were like rolling to the back of my head. I was getting tunnel vision and I felt dizzy. I had to ride at no more than 30 to 40 kilometers per hour just to feel safe. And at the highest passes, unless you have the lungs of a Sherpa, you should spend as little time as possible there. Get your photos, then go down right away. Descending is the only way to address the symptoms of altitude sickness. You can also have oxygen in your backup vehicle for insurance, but note that the small bottles barely have an effect. You need the big tanks. And even when you are acclimatized, you still won't be functioning at 100% for the duration of your stay, which is usually about 2 weeks. I found myself constantly unable to recall where I placed various objects literally seconds after laying them down. I'd literally put something down here and just be totally confused about where the heck I put like my batteries, my mics, my USB dongle, and things like that. All in all, altitude is totally manageable, but you always have to respect it because the consequences could be fatal. With that, we're ready to talk about one of the big questions: cost and tour operator. The total cost of my entire trip, including flights, was 184,000 Philippine pesos or 3,230 US dollars. That covered 12 days total of travel with 9 days of riding within that, and it includes flights, food, motorcycle rental, fuel, accommodations, shopping in Ladakh, repairs to the damage I did to the bike, and everything except a few things I bought before the trip. For me, this is not a lot of money to have a top-tier, life-changing travel experience of this length. I mean, you could easily spend this amount for a few days of luxury travel in the West. And that costs less than a business class ticket to Europe from the Philippines. So, while it is still something to save up for, the value is, for me, unbeatable for such an epic experience. And as a Filipino, you'd be surprised that stuff in Ladakh, despite its remoteness, is cheaper than in Manila. Now, of that amount, 163,500 pesos of it was paid in advance to Philippine Moto Tours. That covered the entire tour with motorcycles, hotels, fuel, the flights, and some of the food. Now, Phil Moto Tours, who is our friend Kanan, handled all of that in advance for us in coordination with his suppliers in Ladakh. I would definitely book with a good, experienced tour operator rather than have to figure things out DIY because there's constant changes there because of the geography and because it is a militarized border region that's close to border conflicts. Now, in the Philippines, arguably, or maybe not arguably, no one is more experienced guiding in the Himalayas than Kanan, Philippine Moto Tours, who took the first ever group of Filipinos to Cardungla in 2017 and the first Filipinos to Umlingla in 2023, which was us. Now, by the time of the publishing of this video, he still had a few slots left for his 2024 tour, so you can go ask him on Facebook or via his website. He is actually Indian from Kerala, or Kerala, I don't know how to pronounce it. But he resides in the Philippines, married to a Filipina, and speaks fluent English and Tagalog, among other languages. All the other groups that I am aware of from the Philippines that went to the Himalayas recently have gone either as part of an official Royal Enfield ride, or with Kolokal, a tour provider based in India. And from what I've seen, Kolokal also offers great photo and video coverage. It's also totally doable DIY if you're willing to do the work. Motorcycle rental is abundant in Leh. But with it being so affordable already, I didn't mind paying the premium for a fully organized tour. All I had to do was show up and ride. Moreover, doing it DIY also means you have to figure out permits, which you need to go up Kardung La and to just basically ride around several places in Ladakh. Along with having to figure out details like knowing how far it is between gas stations, which is honestly something you really need to figure out, preparing entrance fees, and the like. Your route will be predetermined by your tour operator and there's little changes every year, so check with them if there are some spots specifically that you'd like to hit. In our case, there was flexibility built into the itinerary, which in the end we really needed due to a day and a half of bad weather. The usual highlights, of course, include Kardung La, one of the most popular high passes in the world that's also quite close to the city, to Leh. Umling La, the world's highest motorable pass in 2023 that's beginning to open up to tourists. Nubra Valley, Pangong Lake, and of course, countless more. Now let's talk visas. As a Filipino, unlike most places, applying for a visa to India was easy. We applied 4 weeks before our trip via this Indian government website. I'll leave a link in the description as well. It takes a while to fill up, but it's straightforward. If I remember correctly, you just fill up the electronic form, upload a picture that conforms to their specs, pay 10 US dollars, and you'll get your ETA, your electronic travel authorization, about a day or two later. So you have to print this piece of paper. Actually, we were told to print all our travel documents to be sure, and then bring it with you. This ETA allowed us to enter India twice, only by air, and in our case, in the space of 1 month from the day it was issued. So for example, mine was issued June 6 and expired on July 6, but our trip was July 2 to 14. What? Don't panic. The ETA expiry is just for the day you enter India. So that means we couldn't enter after July 6. Once in India, they'll stamp your passport with your actual visa, and they gave almost all of us 30 days in the country from the time of entry, literally no questions asked. However, I said almost, because one of the immigration officers, I assume mistakenly, stamped the expiry of the ETA on the visa of one of us, meaning she only had 4 days in India, July 2 to 6. And then this had to be a mistake because why would they give her a 4-day visa? So I know you shouldn't have to worry about this, but before leaving that immigration counter, quickly glance at the stamp to be sure that they gave you the 30 days or whatever length you need. It was very stressful, but in the end, our friend was able to extend her visa with the help of our local guide. But it cost her 2 days of riding with us and extra expense to pay a guide to ride with her to catch up with us. Let's talk about flying to and through India. Philippine Moto Tours booked Singapore Airlines, of course, a wonderful airline, and we did Manila to Singapore to Delhi and back, with extra long layovers in Singapore and Delhi both ways to make sure that we didn't miss our connecting flights. Once in India from Delhi to Leh, again the main city in Ladakh, we took budget airline Indigo on the way in and flag carrier Air India on the way out. Total cost for all the flights was about 60,000 pesos, but more for those who booked later. But honestly, I can't really recommend taking Indigo even if it's cheaper because of their strict luggage policies. On paper, they only allow one piece of 15 kilos of check-in baggage. You can buy 10 kilos more to match the 25 kilo allowance of the long-haul flight, which is what we did. But you can't pay to bring more than one piece of check-in luggage, so that can be a headache. And what's worse is that they didn't allow some of us to bring more than one carry-on bag, even if they weren't that big. Some of us did get away with it though, so I guess it depends on the check-in counter agent, but not having that certainty when you're flying this far is very stressful. For example, me in my paranoia, which looking back, I guess I needn't have feared because my bags were small, I hurriedly stuffed everything from my second carry-on into my first while I was in line, which was obviously super hectic and super stressful. But what did happen was they let me check in that empty carry-on bag free of charge alongside my nearly 25 kilo suitcase. So basically, just be mindful about bringing more than one piece of carry-on past a certain size and more than one piece of check-in. Or just take Air India and not worry about it. Furthermore, Indigo uses the much smaller, more crowded, older Terminal 2 at Delhi Airport, where going through security was a bit of a nightmare. The number one warning I can give about flying through any airport in India is that security inspection is extremely strict about their policy of requiring you to put every single electronic thing, not just the laptops, cameras, and tablets, but every cable, every battery, charger, power bank, dongle, every little gadget had to go out of your bag and into the tray. This was, for me, with all my camera gear, extremely stressful in our transition from Terminal 3 through Terminal 2 for our Indigo flight. I had to dig all these electronics out of my hastily repacked carry-on and place them, along with all my other stuff like my shoes and jacket, into a total of 4 trays. All the while, I had to battle locals with my elbows out because they had no compunction about cutting the line. And I was really taking so long though because there was so much stuff. And because people need to put so much stuff in trays, the trays run out, further delaying the process. Then, of course, once I was through, I was rushed to empty my trays so as not to hold up the line, and this is a perfect recipe for losing valuable electronics, which is exactly what happened to one of us, whose AirPods Pros were left in his tray and then stolen, and they were halfway to Nepal by the end of the day. True story. That said, for all my ranting, they didn't question a single piece of my camera gear, all my batteries, or any other electronics at any point. We'll talk more about what I brought later. For drones, as a foreigner, you can't bring in anything 250 grams or above, so it's DJI Mini territory all the way. I didn't bring my Mini 3 Pro, but fortunately one of us did bring a Mini 2, so we have some beautiful drone shots thanks to him. Shout out Mither, you the man. So the best suggestion I can make is to find big Ziploc bags and stuff your electronics into those to make taking them out and packing them back in as fast and easy as possible and to minimize the chances of losing something small but essential like a battery, power cable, or AirPods. To be fair though, the Indigo flight was excellent for a budget airline with ample legroom and proper-sized reclinable seats. And that flight into Ladakh is, as you might expect, breathtaking as you get your first glimpse of the Himalayas mid-flight. On the way back, we took Air India, which had the full generous 25-kilo luggage allowance with more than one piece allowed, and they used the newer, sprawling Terminal 3 at Delhi Airport. Leh Airport, where you fly out to Delhi from, is actually quite small, but now they regulate the crowding there by not allowing you to enter, I think, until about 3 hours before your flight. Now I'll say a few things about the local culture. Ladakh is truly a wondrous, beautiful place with a mix of Indian, Tibetan, and various regional influences. Language-wise, they speak mostly Ladakhi, so you'll have to make do with English, which they're pretty good at anyway. The people here are some of the nicest people I have ever met while traveling. If you're wondering about food, expect Indian food at restaurants, hotels, and inns, meaning it's spiced strongly, and a lot of meals will be completely vegetarian. Most Filipinos don't get on well with this, but we enjoyed it. On the road in the mountains though, in these small roadside eateries, all you'll get without speaking the language are probably bread omelette, which is what it sounds like, and Maggi instant noodles with curry, along with, little bags of chips and biscuits. Unfortunately, nearly all of us suffered some degree of diarrhea. So I'd make sure to bring medicine for that or something like Ursiflora to help rebalance your gut bacteria. Now, talking about accommodations and services. Our accommodations were all booked in advance by Philippine Moto Tours. Hotels in Leh are surprisingly quite nice. The rooms are big, clean, and new. Showers are great, although some hotels the hot water wasn't consistent. We stayed in 2 different ones during our trip, Welkin High Hotel and Tara Palace Hotel, which are basically just beside each other. Wi-Fi signal could be patchy, but they both had Wi-Fi. Don't expect internet or much reception anywhere else aside from Leh. For which reason, I think it's useless to buy a local SIM in India. We opted not to. For emergencies, your local guide will have reception where it's available. For the rest of the trip, we stayed in a good mix of simple but comfortable and cozy accommodations, ranging from this rider's glamp site where the tents had their own bathrooms but no hot water, to simple inns like this that were warm and cozy and served good hot meals. Every one of them had electricity for some part of the day until about 10 p.m. or midnight. They had good toilets and baths with running water, but most had hot water just some of the time. Again, zero internet access, so don't even think of trying to work remotely while you're up there. On another important note, we could find no laundry service in Ladakh. And you're kind of not allowed to wash clothes in your hotel room in Leh. There's signs that say specifically. We still did though, making sure not to make a mess and to wash off all the mud and big dirt outside and to hang our clothes only inside the rooms. I brought my own clothesline for that purpose. We were, however, allowed to use the washing machine and clotheslines in one of the inns where we stayed. Let's talk about money. The good news for anyone coming to Ladakh at this time is that everything there is cheap, even for a Filipino. At this time, 1 peso converts to about 1.5 Indian rupees, making estimates a breeze. $1 is about 80 rupees, FYI. Basically, I just thought of everything as being priced in pesos, and stuff was still cheaper than I expected once I did the conversion. So we had our money changed by our local guide who gave us market rates. So for the whole trip, 11 days minus travel, I only changed 50,000 pesos, about 260 US dollars, and I didn't spend much of it until the final shopping days because we had paid for most everything up front already. Try spending that little in other countries. Alright, you've made it in, now it's time to ride. There's motorcycle rental on like every street corner in Leh. The most popular and probably best choice of bike is the eponymous Royal Enfield Himalayan, which is ubiquitous around Ladakh. This is where you learn just how perfect the Himalayan is to ride in the Himalayas. In our group, it was an all Royal Enfield affair, with most using the latest model Himalayan 411 with a switchable ABS, some on Scram 411s, and one on a first-generation BS3 Himalayan with 50 Ks on the clock. You'd think that that rider was unlucky to get that, but the carbureted Himalayans actually perform better at altitude than the fuel-injected ones. If you want to take another bike, I've seen guys rent the Royal Enfield Classic 350 Reborn, which won't be as capable as the Himalayan or Scram, but offer a relaxed ride and a different character. Recently, I saw groups take the KTM 390 Adventure, which I personally wouldn't choose despite it being a great fun bike because it's just more finicky. And then just last week, I saw some Filipino riders using the BMW G310 GS. So you do have some options. Be sure to ask your tour provider what the current bikes available are. If you go sometime next year or you're watching this from the future, then probably you'll be able to get to rent and ride the all-new Royal Enfield Himalayan 452, which may offer the best of both worlds in terms of capability and familiarity. On that note, one of the best things about riding Royal Enfields in the country that they're made is low repair costs. I banged up my bike pretty badly from 2 hard off-road spills, and my total repair bill for smashed turn signals, a smashed tank guard, and a bent handlebar was less than 2,000 pesos, or about $30. For those of you from other countries who want to do the itchy boots thing and take your own bikes, I suppose you can, but I honestly have no idea how to go about it. I did see some guys riding around on big European bikes and Africa Twins, but I think these were Indian tourists riding up from the south or something. Next up, let's cover riding gear. This is probably one of the top of mind concerns for people when preparing for a Himalayas ride. And you should also factor this into your budget. People coming from hot tropical countries like the Philippines, we're all afraid of the cold and don't quite know what to expect from a cold ride. So, as early as now, let me allay your fears and assure you that you don't need to upgrade everything you own. In fact, it's highly recommended that you use gear you're already comfortable and familiar with. The key to dealing with the cold is good old-fashioned layering and a good set of waterproof gear. Our tour leader Kanan, who has probably ridden in the Himalayas more than anyone in the Philippines, is the exemplar for this, using just standard weekend riding gear and layering up to deal with the cold. If you want to buy specialty gear, of course, nothing wrong with that, but I suggest buying something you'll continue to use regularly even after the trip. Now for my helmet, I used my trusty HJC Arfa 70 carbon helmet equipped with a Cardo Pactalk Slim intercom. This is a premium helmet, although the only premium helmet I own. That's great for pretty much everything. It's sleek, it's light, comfortable, quiet, and of course, protective. I actually had a bit of a gnarly crash in the sand and I felt nothing after landing face first in the dirt with a bit of speed, and all I got was a few scratches on the visor over here. Now I prefer this over a dual sport helmet because it's quieter and lighter. And honestly, I don't suggest using goggles, although one of us did, because it doesn't give you as much insulation from the cold. But you don't even need a helmet that's this expensive. Just probably don't use an open face helmet. Of course, having a balaclava also really helps in feeling warmer and more comfortable inside your helmet for all-day riding. So I bought two of these popular Dry Plus Dry Fit balaclavas and alternated them, washing one and using the other day to day. These are affordable Philippine-made balaclavas that you can get off Lazada. For a jacket, I used this Comine, let me check on the screen, Comine JK159 Protect Cool Dry Parka, which was only 8,500 pesos or about 150 US dollars from Moto Market. Now, I chose this jacket because it's warmer than a mesh jacket and water resistant, while also wearable casually if I take out the armor. It also includes a complete set chest, elbow, shoulder, and even level 1 back armor. However, the thing with these soft shell rain jackets is that if you don't wash them properly, they can lose their water resistance. Combined with it getting sandblasted during my aforementioned crash, the one time I really needed it to be waterproof, it was already wetting out considerably. So, to be honest, any decent riding jacket will do. Just make sure to have a good waterproof shell to put on top of it. Especially if you're using a mesh jacket, be sure to add layers to compensate. And now's a good time to bring up the temperature we encountered there in early July of 2023. It was a range between freezing at the highest passes all the way up to 23 degrees Celsius on a sunny day in Leh. It was still cold enough to have snow at Kardung La during this time, whereas in August this year, there already was none, as you'll see in Itchy Boots' first episode of her Himalayas ride. When you are on the motorcycle, it feels always like single digits to low 2 digits Celsius, but on a sunny day at the lower range of altitudes around Leh, it got hot enough only to wear a jersey. Even at night, not riding though at like 2 to 5 degrees Celsius in town, and if the weather was good, I was comfy wearing flip-flops and a single layer of bottoms, of like normal pants, to go with my puffy jacket over a t-shirt. But the minute it starts to rain, that changes the equation completely. And if you get wet and stay wet throughout the day, you can go from miserable to hypothermic. Like putting your hands on the engine or the exhaust pipe cold. Fortunately, we had only one day of that, but that one day was enough to make its mark. In addition, one day of relatively light rain made road conditions a lot worse, with big rock falls and even flooding. We actually had to pause from riding the day after our rainy ride due to road conditions, and we're just lucky we made it back to Leh before any road closures stranded us. These road closures can and have caused major detours of hundreds of kilometers for some riders in the past. So back to the waterproof jacket, I used this kind of standard Columbia rain jacket, which I actually wore inside my riding jacket on the day it rained, for the simple reason that my riding jacket, the one I showed you earlier, was already wet by the time I put on the rain jacket. So I put this basically to insulate myself from the wet. Now, it would have been better to have already been wearing it on top of my riding jacket before it started to rain, but we didn't expect all the rain we got that one day. And of course, this waterproof jacket, this hard shell jacket, serves as an additional layer of windproof insulation. So my standard layers on most days would be, I would have a dry fit t-shirt as my bottom layer, nothing special, you know, your usual Adidas, Nike, whatever brand dry fit t-shirt. Then I would have a thermal base layer on top of that, or sometimes even the base layer without the t-shirt, and then I'd wear my riding jacket on top of it. My base layer of choice is this one. It's from Element Pure. It's super comfy and soft because it's made of Tencel. I also have a basic REI base layer, normal dry fit base layer. and a Patagonia Capilene 3 base layer. And these served as my versatile tops for both on and off the bike. A thing I like about these other base layers, not the Element Pure one, is they're like half zip with kind of a higher neck to protect my neck from the sun. Now, when we would be climbing up a high pass and the temperature would drop significantly, I would add this furry fleece tube scarf from Headwear. So you can use any scarf. And then I would add one more of these base layers. I'd also put on a tencel or wool base layer bottom like this. This is also from Element Pure for those moments, and the end result would be I would be perfectly comfortable except for my hands. Now let's talk riding pants. For the entire ride, I just used one pair of pants. These Sedici Marco mesh adventure pants that I bought from Cycle Gear in San Francisco, California. As you can see, these are thick pants with mesh sections and an inner waterproof lining, like right here. See that? That's one end of it. And the waterproof lining basically zips into here. So that makes them adaptable to a variety of conditions. So again, I didn't want to buy pants that I'd never be able to use riding in the Philippines, and these proved to be a steal. Brand new, they were only $150. But now I think they've been replaced by a version 2, which goes for still only $180 to $200, way less than the big brand adventure gear. And apparently these are designed by Revzilla. So these pants come with CE level 2 knee pads and empty slots here for optional hip protectors. And another great feature I love about these is that they have these zipped water-resistant pockets, like here, right there. So you can keep your wallet there for light rain. But in my experience, it's not fully waterproof for long downpours. So it was cold enough that I could wear these pants the whole time without ever removing the waterproof liner, which is very convenient because if you're a rider, you know kind of a pain it is to have to put on and remove rain pants over big boots. I never had to fuss with doing that, and the liner kept my legs completely dry throughout that miserable wet ride. That was all day, 300 kilometers in light but constant rain. The key though is making sure to wear this waterproof lining, see, with the elastic end, over your boots, which sadly wasn't really possible because my ADV boots were too big. And we all know that a waterproof boot, once it lets water in, doesn't let it out. It becomes like a big mug. And so water was sloshing in there when it rained all day. Now, speaking of boots, I'm not actually sure what the best recommendation is, but I used these Rio Adventure boots, which I'd already had for like a year, and they cost just over 8,000 pesos, 150 US dollars, but I got them on sale from Moto Market for less than 7,000 pesos. Now, these have protected my shins several times when spilling off-road, both at home and in the Himalayas. However, they do have one big drawback, and that's, as you can see, size and weight. The boots occupied a disproportionate amount of space and weight in my luggage because I refused to wear them in transit, which is what a lot of riders do to get around weight and space limits. Most of the other riders use lower cut adventure boots, maybe up to about here, which is probably what I'd use next time. But at the same time, I may not have gotten home completely unscathed if not for the protection these boots provided. So that's a trade-off you have to decide on for yourself. For socks, I bought these cheap waterproof socks from Lazada for only 849 pesos or 15 bucks US. These aren't truly waterproof like, I don't know, maybe expensive Gore-Tex socks might be, but they actually did a great job keeping my feet only slightly damp and not freezing cold from the wet when water was sloshing in my boots for a few hours. Now, for dry rides and for sleeping, for extra warmth I mean, I had two pairs of these Lorpen Merino Light Hiker wool socks that I think are just the right thickness to be kind of an all-weather sock. I did bring one pair of thicker wool socks, but I never needed them since I had big boots, and the accommodations always had thick blankets anyway. I got these from Amazon 9 years ago and they're still going strong, so I'd absolutely recommend them as they're priced quite affordably and you can bring them anywhere and everywhere. For gloves, I brought two pairs. One standard pair of riding gloves. I don't need to show those to you. They're just normal riding gloves. But I also just mostly stuck to wearing these 9-year-old Columbia ski gloves. And they did a great job of keeping my hands warm and dry for the most part, except when we got to the highest altitudes and when it rained that one time. Now, honestly, for gloves, this is actually where you might want to invest in a purpose-built solution. Or you can try that old trick of wearing latex surgical gloves inside your bigger gloves, or even wearing big rubber gloves outside your standard riding gloves. The point is that it is actually really important to keep your hands warm because they get cold the fastest. One of the riders actually brought handlebar mittens. Now, these aren't expensive and will definitely keep your hands warmer than just using gloves. Now, to augment my gloves, I brought a bunch of these Hot Hands hand warmers that I got off Amazon. So you just take these out, and then so you open this and you expose them to the air and shake them, and then they stay warm inside your gloves for about 8 hours. They were good for everything except for that one, again, awful wet ride. My hands were still too cold then, but they did help, just for like maybe a few degrees of warmth. So Hot Hands also makes foot warmers, but I didn't need them. And these are also good for another purpose, for keeping your batteries warm. Batteries lose a lot of performance in the cold, so putting some hand warmers beside your camera batteries or your phone helps to keep them performing optimally. And of course, you can also just leave your phone plugged into a power bank to keep it warm and charged. And I think that about does it for riding gear, but feel free to chime in with any questions. Now let's talk about luggage and packing. So for luggage, I went ahead and bought myself this. Check out the size of this bad boy. This is an OGO Trucker 110-liter suitcase. It's a purpose-built, big motorcycle wheeled bag, and it's the biggest suitcase I own. So I got this for 11,950 pesos from Moto Market, but I got it on sale for 8,365 pesos. So I got this, one of the big reasons I got this was it has this padded helmet compartment inside, and down here, I'll show you on B-roll, it's got a dedicated boot locker that you can stuff a big dirty boot into, and yes, it fit my big Rio boots. So I still wrapped my boots in a big plastic bag, of course, to just help with cleanup. Along with that, of course, it's got enough stuff left over for all my other stuff. To be honest, you don't need to buy an expensive purpose-built bag like this. And one disadvantage of this bag is even if you have a bunch of space left over, it's still heavy on its own. So if you're like me, you'll run over your weight limit before you fill up every cubic inch of space inside. That weight limit was a constant worry for some of us, like myself, because I had my massive heavy adventure boots that I didn't want to wear on the plane. Also, since I brought such big boots, I stuffed these as much as I could with all my socks and even put my cup noodles in here to prevent them from being crushed in transit. That said, one of us had a more expensive version of this, also OGO, that came with a boot bag. So what he did was he went through security check with his boots, and then after clearing security, he placed them in that boot bag and carried them separately. And also, we had extra weight because we brought in cans of food because we were warned that, Filipinos are not gonna like the food in India. Again, this is subjective, but our group didn't have a problem with it for the most part. So one big concern for me before leaving was how to pack my helmet. So having bought a motorcycle travel suitcase anyway, I decided to pack my helmet there, which was in the end a good decision because we encountered one check-in agent going back to Singapore from Delhi who refused to let us hand carry our helmets. Now some of us were able to do this on the way into India with no issues. So when it comes to managing your helmet and boots, it's up to you, but it's safer to check it in, particularly for the helmet. So basically what you do is, when you put your helmet in this compartment, don't just put it in there, don't just rely on the padding. Just make the most of the space and wrap your clothes around this helmet. So all our helmets made it all the way to India and back unscathed. And for now, I think you always need to bring a towel anyway, so you can wrap your towel around this. and along all with your other clothes, especially if you have some soft cotton clothes. Now, what I did was, as I mentioned, I removed most of the padding from all of my riding gear, and then I used them to give additional protection to my helmet. So if you can imagine, so this helmet is here, and basically the sides of the bag, so both here in front, here on the side, and here at the bottom of the compartment, that is lined with all of like my elbow pads, my knee pads, my shoulder pads from my riding gear. And it's perfect because, you know, this stuff is really meant to absorb hard impacts. But you don't need an expensive suitcase like this. Canan, our tour leader, uses a regular big Adidas sports duffel, while my girlfriend Pia, she got these extremely cheap but durable canvas duffels from Lazada. One big 120-liter to check in, and a 40-liter one that's small enough to pass as cabin baggage. Now, these barely weigh anything compared to this suitcase, and they have lots of space, so you can bring in more stuff compared to this suitcase. Just the problem is they don't have wheels. But in the Himalayas, you're barely going to lug around your luggage anyway. For my motorcycle tail bag, I brought my trusty Rhino Walk 20-liter pack. These are basically high-quality, affordable Chinese Kriega US-20 dry pack ripoffs. Okay, and these are tried and tested by adventure riders and moto tourers here in the Philippines. So on the flights in, these were in my suitcase used as a packing cube to contain all of my non-riding clothes. Then later on, I tied it to my motorcycle where it contained my tripod, water, rain gear, and other daily ride essentials. So now the inner bag that's zipped on of the Rhino Walk, this yellow thing, it's actually waterproof, and I've tested that over and over in some pretty strong downpours. So you don't actually need to carry full-size motorcycle luggage because the trips nowadays are all supported by a chase vehicle, usually a pickup or an MPV, sometimes both. In our case though, since the chase vehicle was a pickup with an exposed bed, it was best to leave our suitcases, our big suitcases, back in the hotel in Leh and just repack our stuff into smaller bags that could easily fit inside the cab of the pickup. So I actually wasn't prepared for this, but luckily one of the other riders had an extra soft bag where I could repack my stuff for like the 5-6 days that we were out. Shout out Doc, thanks for that. Now in Pia's case, BB Moto's case, all she had to do was repack her stuff into her smaller 40-liter duffel. Continuing on, for my carry-on backpack, I used this quality durable Oxford M30R tank bag that I also got from Moto Market. So it has a magnetic mount, this one, that can actually be zipped off from here to convert it into a small backpack. And it's so small that check and counter agents won't take a second look at it. As you can see, I went DIY and I stuffed a generic camera cube that I've had for 10 years. So this cube is how I carried all my camera gear for the trip without any strain on my back. So as you can see, it's easily removable since it has handles. There you go. So when I park the bike, I don't need to remove the whole tank bag, which would be a pain because aside from the magnets, it's strapped in to the handlebar with this. It also has these side pockets where I put accessories, and it's expandable via another zipper here. So it goes up like that. But I actually don't use the expansion because I don't have enough stuff to make it rigid, so it flops around too much while the bike is moving. And it also obscures my view too much. Just one downside of the M30R is that it's just water resistant. And the waterproof bag that it comes with actually is meant to go inside the bag, which obviously won't work with my setup, which is meant to be kind of easy access top load for the camera gear. I just use a cheap rain cover for it. Let's see if I have it in here. Yeah, there. I just use this cheap rain cover, and honestly, it doesn't completely do the job. So stuff in the outer zip compartments will be damp at the end or like after a hard downpour or a whole day of rain, but no more than that. Then for my second carry-on, my personal item, I have this cheap no brand canvas messenger bag. So it comes with a camera compartment inside, there, as you can see. But for this trip, I completely removed this compartment to maximize the usable volume inside, which came in really handy during the aforementioned airport repacking fiasco. Now in this bag went all my other electronics and essentials, including my 13-inch M1 MacBook Pro. So you can see it fits nicely in here, even in a laptop sleeve. It also had my USB-C dongle with the extra ports and the card reader. I had hard drives in protective cases, power banks, all my printed travel documents in a manila envelope, noise-canceling headphones, etc., etc. Now, if you're wondering why I needed a laptop, it's because I needed to be able to dump my footage from day to day to my hard drives. Maybe there was a more compact solution, but this 13-inch laptop was slim enough for me and definitely more capable than whatever specialized boxes I could have bought for backup. So basically, the tank bag backpack would always go up to the compartment above the overhead bin while in the plane, while this sat in front of me, small enough not to interfere with my legroom. All right, now let's talk camera gear. So I've already mentioned that because of airport security, you don't want to bring in too many electronics or just to have them, a lot of them that aren't organized well. But more than that, it's a motorcycle trip. And you don't really want to be carrying a lot of gear because one, it's prone to getting banged up, and two, it gets in the way of the experience if you already have so much other gear to worry about, and three, you don't want to be carrying camera gear all day on your body in a big backpack. So at home, I normally ride with this. It's a camera waist pack, so completely no weight on my shoulders. But it's just, as you can see, it's just not enough room to fit gear to shoot a journey this epic. So again, as you saw earlier, I used my tank bag with a generic padded camera cube to carry my gear. Now, for my main riding camera, I used the DJI Action 3. This shoots 10-bit footage, which looks noticeably better than 8-bit, especially when you notice how it retains highlights in the sky. And also, the batteries on this do really well even in the cold. Now that the DJI Action 4 and newest GoPro Hero 12, 13, I forget, whatever, 13, 12 Black are out, I definitely wouldn't pick the Action 3. I would pick the Action 4. I still wouldn't pick the new GoPro because I've just had too many reliability issues with them. Like the camera freezes, all of that stuff. In any case, the Action 3 never once failed to turn on and roll, never hung or stopped recording, never lost a second of footage, which all continue to happen to many motovloggers with various generations of GoPros. The GoPros, even the old ones like the Hero 7, do have built-in GPS that you can use to overlay cool data on your footage, while the Action 3 doesn't offer any way to do that. And the Action 4 requires a separate Bluetooth remote. So I brought 3 batteries for the Action 3 in the included battery case for the Adventure Pack. So here, so this is just a charging case. It doesn't have its own power bank, so you do still need to plug this in. But these 3 batteries were more than enough for even the longest days of riding. Although I did make sure to keep them topped up by charging them using my power banks mid-ride. Then I used this. It's a Dango design gripper mount as my chin mount on my HJC helmet. And then to mic myself up in the helmet, I used basically like a cheap no brand lavalier mic and attached it to the Action 3 using this okay, so I have like a volume control knob that I locked with gaffer tape to use as an attenuator, as this is an unfortunate hack required to get around the Action 3's infamous audio level issue. So these all plug into this, a Boya BYK4 USB-C to stereo adapter into the Action 3. So quite a lot of cabling, and also not the best performing. In hindsight, it would have been better to use a DJI mic with a charging case with one transmitter inside my helmet and the other in my tail bag to record the exhaust sound. But that would be more expensive and probably less water resistant. I also brought this Insta360 1RS, only with the 360 module, which I kept on the Insta360 motorcycle mount on my handlebar. I briefly used it on the invisible selfie stick behind me, triggering it with the Insta360 GPS remote, until I realized that the GPS remote is an unreliable, overpriced piece of junk, and I hate it so much. Anyway, rounding out my camera setup were my Sony a7 IV, mainly for stills. That's what I'm shooting this with, although I did shoot a few spiels on it, with the DT VMic D4 Duo mic attached. That mic points in both directions front and back, making it perfect for close-range vlogging. Then, I only brought a single lens, my Tamron 28-75 f2.8, due to space constraints. It would have been nice to bring something like a Sony 24-105 f4 lens, but for my money, it was too expensive. Now, another pro videographer, Mither, he was on the trip and he shot some incredible B-roll, as you can see here, on his tiny 1-inch sensor Sony ZV-1. So I can recommend that as an all-around vlogging and cinematic B-roll camera for motorcycle trips. And finally, one of my most used cameras on this trip was my trusty old iPhone 12. If you already own an iPhone 14 or 15, especially the Pro models, these might be good enough to do everything you need off the bike, from vlogging to B-roll, especially combined with a good wireless mic like the DJI mic or the cheaper Full Aim X5 that I reviewed recently. You can check it out over here. Do I wish I had brought my drone? Yes! Again, I didn't. I was afraid of running afoul of the authorities. But again, if I had brought my drone, it would have presented more packing problems. So, though most of Ladakh is militarized due to it being a border region with China and further on with Pakistan, they were more lenient than I expected when it came to flying a drone. One thing I did make a mistake about was my hard drives. I brought two 1 terabyte hard drives, one to mirror the other. And this turned out to be way too little storage for shooting a 12-day trip in 4K, even shooting in the space-saving HEVC format. It wasn't just for my footage, it was for my girlfriend's footage and to get footage from Mither the videographer and from all the other riders. Now, for power banks, I brought 3 small ones instead of one big one because I was paranoid about my fast-charging 20,000 milliamp hour power bank running afoul of airline rules. Now, a fast-charging big power bank like that, the 20,000 milliamp hour one, technically exceeds the allowed capacity. But they look exactly like regular power banks, so I think they're rarely, if ever, stopped. So let me know in the comments if you've ever experienced that. So instead, I have these 2 compact 10,000 milliamp hour fast charging power banks for my phone and camera gear. And these have 2 USB-A and 1 USB-C port each. And I also add a small 5,000 milliamp hour fast charging power bank to charge my intercom on or to lend to others. These were enough to keep all my electronics and gear powered through each riding day. So all of our accommodations had electricity in the late afternoon to the early evening, so it was no problem to use my extension outlet to charge everything upon arrival. So I use an extension that has 3 universal plugs and a bunch of USB-A slots here. Plugs in India are standard 2-prong round 220-volt outlets. For non-riding clothes and accessories, first of all, I brought 7 days worth of underwear, mostly quick-dry Uniqlo Airism boxer briefs, which I'm not going to show you, you can just look them up. Then I had a North Face down jacket that I bought in 2015 that gave a lot of warmth but could pack nearly flat. Other cold weather clothes include standard stuff like a beanie, and I had 1 cashmere scarf from many years ago that I got in Mongolia. Now, I didn't need 2 scarves, but it was nice to have a clean one for hanging out, the cashmere scarf, and like a dirty one for riding. For the rest of my clothes, the idea was for everything to be multi-purpose and layerable so I could mix and match according to the situation and avoid bringing any bulky things like sweaters. So there's my aforementioned base layers. I had 1 Adidas Dry Fit t-shirt, which I wore in transit, and 1 cotton t-shirt like this one for sleeping. And then I had a pair of Nike jogging pants, which I wore in transit for comfort and were also perfect for sleeping. And along with that, I had 2 base layer bottoms. I also had a pair of knee-length shorts, these ones. And then I would wear, at night, I would wear these wool base layers underneath these shorts. I also had another pair of shoes, a pair of waterproof low-cut Timberland boots that I had since 2017. I wore these in transit, but frankly, I didn't need them at all. It would have been nicer to wear my sandals in transit and just bring socks for the plane in case I got cold. But I brought them too in case I had any problems with my riding boots or if the boots just got too wet. And then I had 1 pair of extremely slim sandals, my durable Earthrunner Circadian grounding sandals, which have thin, totally flat soles. I also had 1 tumbler, although water actually mostly stays cold up there, so you can just buy water bottles and leave it in the plastic bottle and it'll still be cold and get even colder if you leave them out overnight. tumblers do take up some weight and volume. So if you're not going in the summer, you might not need one of these, or you can just take a lighter, smaller, non-insulated water bottle. Speaking of which, you can mostly only buy water up there. Few places have purified water dispensers. Of course, don't forget to bring your basic medicines and a compact first aid kit if possible. We were lucky to have a doctor in our group, but the meds we used aside from altitude pills were diarrhea medicine, antihistamines, painkillers, and cold and flu medicine. You might also consider packets of hydration salts as well to help with the altitude. Phew, okay, that was a lot. I didn't expect this video to go this long, but to be honest, I had so many questions before going on this trip, so I answered as many as I could remember in this video. I'm sure that despite that, there were a few important things I forgot, in which case, please don't hesitate to ask me in the comments your questions about riding in the Himalayas. Now, if you want even more stories, my buddy Julio Iturmoto recorded a full 2-hour podcast where we and other riders chatted all about international rides, which you can check out in one of the links in the description. Just know that chunks of this are in Filipino, but most of this is in English. Anyway, with that, thanks a lot for watching this whole thing. I really hope this was helpful. Do leave a like if it was. And please check out my actual travel vlogs on the trip to see what riding in the Himalayas has in store for you. So with that, I'll see you on the next piece.